And good evening, everyone, and welcome to OTF Connects. Our fall season is underway, and we are excited to welcome Becky Kennedy, who is an experienced OTF Connects presenter. I had the good fortune of moderating one of her sessions last year and thoroughly enjoyed it, and am looking forward to this one tonight as well, getting started with play and inquiry. We have a large group of teachers from across the province, right across the province of Ontario tonight. So thank you to all of you for giving up your time to come together with folks from around the province to join in this discussion about play and inquiry. So I'm going to turn my microphone off, and I'm going to go into the chat right now and try and answer all of these questions, and I'm going to turn things over to Becky. Welcome, Becky.
Hi, everyone. Glad you could join us tonight. I am excited to see such a large group. So we'll get started and see how this goes. Just so you know a little bit about me, I'm the early years itinerant resource teacher at the Simcoe County District School Board. I've just started in that position this year. Before that, I was in a full-day kindergarten classroom for 2 years. So I have some kindergarten experience and some experience in the older grades as well. I have a personal passion for play-based learning and inquiry-based learning along with that. So I'm excited to share that with all of you today. You'll notice that I have the two Twitter accounts there. The one is my personal account. The other one is for our school board early years team. So feel free to follow both of those on there. We have an early years chat happening at the same time tonight that my partner is facilitating. So if you get bored here and you'd like to go onto Twitter, go ahead with that as well. It's also on play, so it should be a good experience as well. All right, we're going to take a look at the kindergarten program tonight. That's obviously going to be our basis for getting started with play and inquiry because so much of what we need is in that document. One of the greatest and most exciting things I think about reading that new program is that it gives us so much freedom to be exploring the play and inquiry. It gets us started with that, and it really tells us how to go. So hopefully I'll be able to help you to dig into that document a little more this evening. I'm going to get you to do a little, use that clip art tool just one more time, and just so I can get a feel for you folks, if you can just put a little check mark somewhere on that continuum as to where you feel you are in terms of play and inquiry-based programs. So you're not comfortable at all or not interested in it, you're a little bit comfortable, or you're really confident in the program that you're running, that it's play and inquiry-based. See lots of middle of the roaders. That's fantastic. Awesome. Excellent. Lots of people who are interested to learn more, and hopefully we'll be able to move everyone along. Do some more thinking on that journey tonight. Fantastic. All right. So here are the 4 frames of the new kindergarten program: problem solving and innovating, self-regulation and well-being, demonstrating literacy, mathematics, behaviors, and belonging and contributing. You'll notice those are on the outside of the document. On the inside are those 4 circles, and those come, or 4 pieces of the pie, I should say, and those come from the How Does Learning Happen? Pedagogy for Early Learning. And so what they're really trying to do there is connect those pieces from early learning to the kindergarten program and moving that forward throughout school years, making that a cohesive program and understanding that everybody is a part of that. The other piece there is that children, families, and educators are together in the center of that, meaning that we're working together. We're all on the same team, and we need those pieces in order to make the other things all fit together. So I think Susan's going to put 3 links in the comments section to the ELECT document, which is what the early years, early childhood educators tend to use in childcare programs. Think, Feel, and Act, and then the How Does Learning Happen document, which you can have for your viewing pleasure later on. All right, so you should see a slide there. I'm not seeing it, but it should say why this learning for this child at this time. And that's really the focus of our question this evening. It's great to talk about play and inquiry-based learning, but what it comes down to is thinking about why this learning for this child at this time. What are we doing in our classrooms that is going to move each individual child forward? One more little kind of minds-on activity here. I'd like you just to finish the statement. Try to think about our view of the child and how we see children. So if you can use the text box tool and just finish that with one word, what you think children are. What do you see children as? If you can help with that, I see someone already, that's awesome. I see curious, unique in the chat box, creative, capable, pure, love it. Open. Sponges, it's just filling up. Adventurous, enthusiastic, full of wonder. Individuals, I love that. Creative, resilient, full of natural inquiry, absolutely, and we'll be getting more into that later on today. Determined, so true. Busy, we all know that. Fun, absolutely. Inspiring, adaptive. Excellent. We're going to move on from there, but I just want us to think about that and keep that in the back of our minds today as we're moving through the slides. How do we view children? And we view children as capable and competent and flexible and adaptive, and those are the things that are going to drive our programs forward. When we view children in this way, then we're able to take a play and inquiry stance with confidence, knowing that it's going to move their learning forward. So that's amazing, that we already have these thoughts and feelings and we're open to that sort of change. Amazing. So we're going to start looking at the fundamentals of play-based learning, and then we're going to head into a little bit more about inquiry-based learning, and then we're going to get into documentation at the end. So I'm hoping to give you just a little bit of a taste. I understand we can't, in an hour and a half, it's hard to dig really deep into everything, but hopefully we'll give you a taste, and that will take your learning forward and give you some resources that you can use to dig a little deeper as well. So the fundamentals of play-based learning, they come from the program document on page 13. So if you do have your kindergarten document handy, that would be helpful. If not, if you go back up in the chat, there's a link to the online version as well, and we will be using that a few times this evening. So you might find that handy. You also might be able to put your sticky notes in certain spots as we go by it, and that'll guide you in coming back to certain things. So on page 13, the first fundamental of play-based learning is that play is recognized as a child's right. It's essential to the child's optimal development. So the CMEC, they put out a statement on play-based learning. They understand that it's fundamental. It's actually part of the United Nations Rights of the Child, that it's no longer an option. This is a right that children have to play. And then if you look at page 19 of our kindergarten program, research shows that play-based learning leads to greater emotional, social, and academic success. The neural pathways are strengthened in the brain during play in ways that can't happen in other contexts. And as well, there's the connections to belonging, contributing, self-regulation, problem-solving, and obviously there's those links to literacy and numeracy that come up inherently in play. And our goal is seeing how we can watch the play and help to move that learning forward in contexts that are authentic to our students. So the first video that I'd like to show is about relationships first, and about the quality of the relationships that we have. This is a video by Dr. Jean Clinton. What's going to happen is Susan's going to put the link into the chat, which I see that she did already. It's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. I'm going to ask you to go and watch that video and then come back in 3 minutes and then move it to the next slide, and we're going to think about that. And hopefully that'll get you started with today. So if you just click on that link and then we'll be back in 3 minutes and we'll move on.
So I'll just clarify for newcomers, the link is in the chat, and if you click on that, it will open it up in your own browser, and you can go out and watch it and then come back. I mean, keep this open and then just come back and join us again when you're finished watching. If the link doesn't work, copy it and paste it into a browser.
Hopefully you were able to watch that video. The part that really got to me was, oh, I'm sorry if you weren't able to play that video. The link, yes, absolutely will be able to play later. Basically, the gist of the video is that relationships come first, and without those quality relationships where children learn to trust us and learn to know that when there's a problem that we're going to deal with that first, without that, then nothing else can happen. And really, that's why belonging and contributing is the first frame in our new document. And it's important to remember, and we often forget this, that it's now 1/4 of our document. And that means that it needs to take up 25% of our time, if not more at times. So just keep that in mind, that it's 1/4 of our program now. And how are we intentionally making sure that our students feel valued and important in our classroom? So that being said, I have a little question for us to consider that you're welcome to join in the chat, or you're welcome to use the text box tool and add it here. That would be fantastic. I want you to think about what strategies you have in place to ensure that there's time in the day to interact with both individual children and small groups of children in their play. So part of setting up a play-based learning environment is making sure that we have time to interact with students while they're playing. So I'll give you a second to talk about that. Michelle, great point. But in an SK1, so maybe if somebody has a solution to that and how you find ways to kind of balance that, find balance in an SK1 class, that would be fantastic. One of the ways that I've seen it done is through open literacy centers, where you're able to pull those small groups and make sure you're talking with them during those points of part of the day, so that you can reach more people that way. Open-ended large box of play, absolutely, and making sure that we're playing with the children, not just watching them play or using that time to do other things, which is so hard. And I see Corey mentioning something about making sure that you're hitting oral language within a 40-minute block. And absolutely, oral language is really the basis of our program. 40-minute block, you're right, is barely enough just to skim the surface. If you're struggling with the text box, Michelle, just type into the comment. Talking to children during nutrition break, recess, free play, absolutely. Starting the day with play, that's the one that I saw there that is one of my personal passions, making sure that when we start the day with play, our students get a chance to talk with one of the educators face-to-face immediately right off the bat. So we know that whatever happened on the way to school or last night, that comes first, and they get to tell us all about that. And they get to talk to each other about that as well, yeah, for sure. One team member observing and playing and the other team member running groups, that's fantastic for sure. So lots of different strategies to make sure that we have time to do that. I like to hear this about the grade 1. So in Margaret's saying in her grade 1 class, she sets up at least one block a day where she's able to do that to make sure that she can stop and talk with her students. For sure, Laura, it's tricky in an SK1. Yeah, definitely that sort of it. Part of that is just intentionally making sure that we set aside time for play, and if that means that we have to put away something else, then absolutely, it's hard to let that go sometimes, I think. And for me, oftentimes to me that the interaction comes even from a simple making sure that I've spoken to everybody. I'm happy to see you, I'm glad you're here, stopping and making sure that that needs to come first, just like in that video when the child was crying, that comes first before anything else. Definitely. Kimberly, yes, blocks of time for outdoor learning. When they're outside, there's so much space to explore, and you can dig deep with individual students as well. Amazing. Yeah. Beginning with that play. Lots of great things being shared. I'm going to move on, and we'll come back. Please keep sharing as we go, and keep using that chat feature. I'll try and keep up to date with that, but I'm only so good at reading and talking at the same time, so I might miss out on that. But Susan will stop me for sure if there's something to point out. Make sure you're looking at that. As well, I've heard of things, building spots and times into your week, even sharing times where certain students get to share or all students get to share. Just making sure that every voice is heard. Absolutely. So all children are viewed as competent, capable, curious, capable of complex thinking, and rich in potential and experience. So this is the next fundamental foundation of play that we're going to look into. Just thinking about how we view the child, which we did when we first started today. And you use words as curious and competent, excited, adaptable, resilient. And those are the things when we understand that children come with that rich experience, then we're able to let go and understand that they can own their learning, and we can help with that. And when educators view our children as competent and capable, the learning program becomes a place of wonder, excitement, and joy for both the child and the educator. And that, to me, it really spoke to me and summed it up, because I feel better. I feel better, and we all feel better. Our students feel better when we're playing and when we're understanding that that is an awesome way to learn, when we capture those little moments of learning that come authentically during their play. It comes out, it's amazing. And if you think about, if we include the families in that as well, when we view the families as competent and capable and part of that learning journey, the amount of learning that goes along with that and the amount of joy that goes along with that is absolutely huge. It's important to remember in that we honor their learning where they're at, that we recognize that each and every student who walks in our door is capable of amazing things. Thinking about back to time spent with them, do we make sure that we're telling them that they're competent and capable? Does the way we interact with them reflect this, or are we busy moving on to the next thing? I've been doing a lot of reading about behavior management systems lately. Little things like that. Do the way we redirect children, does that reflect our view of them as competent and capable and rich in experience? So I have another video to direct you to, and I hope this one works a little bit easier. Thinking about a natural curiosity and a desire to explore, play, and inquire are among the primary drivers of learning among children. So this is how children learn. This is best learning, it's best practice, and we know this, we've learned this, research is showing this. So we just need to give ourselves a little bit of a boost in order to push ourselves forward a little bit. So Susan's going to put the link in the chat. This is like 2 videos about Stuart Shanker. She's going to direct you to the EduGames website. And on that, there's 2 self-regulation videos I'd like you to watch. The first one is a play-based approach to learning. It's about 1 minute. And the second one is play-based learning creates passion for learning. So they're both about 1 minute long. And then we can come back. So it should take maybe, we'll give it 4 minutes altogether.
Becky, can you clarify where they find the video on the website?
Yes, absolutely. So if you go into the website and open it up, you should just be able to click down. I'm just going to open it on my computer to make sure I'm giving you the right information at the same time. There should be something there that says video transcripts, and you should be able to just click down.
Apparently there are several video links.
Yes, so you're watching, I put it just below that, you're watching the one that says a play-based approach to learning is important in developing children's self-regulation, and play-based learning creates passion for learning. So you're watching a play-based approach to learning is important in developing children's self-regulation, and play-based learning.
Yeah, I didn't include that sentence underneath before, sorry, so that may have been, so I've put the whole link again with the instructions.
Sure, no problem. All right, we're going to move on. Hopefully you've been able to had a chance to watch both of those videos. If not, you can come back and watch them later. But we just want you to be thinking about that. That's what gets children, it supports children's self-regulation, and how all those 4 frames now begin to work together when we think of that as a whole picture approach. So you will be able to watch those later if you weren't able to get to them today, and I apologize about that if there was issues with that. So next, the slide got mixed up somehow. That's okay. We're going to we'll include this slide next, thinking about what we offer to our children and how we spark that curiosity. So I have 4 pictures here. And I want you to think a little bit about how these photos reflect our beliefs about children and about learning. So thinking about the top one is an example of loose parts used in a variety of ways. This second one is a provocation that's been set up with pumpkins and Plato. And then the bottom one there is a result of the provocation. And the last one here is of pumpkins that have been pre-cut, and the shapes have been pre-cut, and students are gluing those. So you can add that to the chat feature if you'd like, but I want you to really consider about how these photos reflect, what do they say about our beliefs about children, and about how we view them as learning. We use these in our PD session for all of the kindergarten teachers at our school board, and we had some interesting conversations about that. So if you add that to the chat section, just your thoughts, we can have a little bit of a discussion about that, and then we'll move forward. Love that. So they're open-ended materials. We're not telling them what they need to do with them. Absolutely. Open-ended, I think, is the key there, that we're saying that we trust them to do what they need to do with those materials, and they can be used in a lot of ways. And we're saying that there's more than one way to use them. Shows them that they're capable. Absolutely. Different sensory items provided. So we're taking into account not just the learning, but lots of other aspects of child development as well. Sparking imagination. Fantastic. And children, I like that one from Sharon, that children can show their learning and what they understand with open-ended materials. So we get a whole lot more learning, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get down into documentation. That when we have the open-ended materials, there's so much more learning that can be seen from that, absolutely, and demonstrates what they know in their own way. We're not asking them to do it in one way, for sure. The most interesting discussions often come up as a result of the pre-cut pumpkin one and about our thoughts and feelings behind that, whether or not we see that as open-ended because there's lots of ways we can use those, or whether we see that as a little bit more closed because that's what we expect a jack-o'-lantern to look like. And so if we're starting to think about provocations or invitations to learning, things that we're starting to set out, how can we open those up to reflect these beliefs about how that children could surprise us, as Lindsay said, and show us things that we've never seen before, or show us things that we don't even know what they know, that they can lead us into different ways and different opportunities and different things. So thinking about not limiting their creativity and expanding that when we offer materials in our classroom. Positive expansion, absolutely. Lots of different ways to use them, and they don't just stop at the end of the activity. They can be used again and in different ways, which is fantastic. Absolutely. So it's important also to consider that the learning environment plays a really important role in what and how a child learns. I have a video here, and I'm sorry, I really hope it works. I know I'm directing you to a lot of videos, but I want you to see what I'm talking about as opposed to just listening to me talk about it. This one is about rethinking the learning environment, and it's an absolutely fantastic video that makes you think about how you're setting up your environment to support that play and inquiry and what we're doing to move forward from there. So I'm going to have you watch that. We'll come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion and start moving into inquiry and into documentation so that we can make sure we have enough time. So 5 minutes and we'll be back. Excellent. So I hope you had a chance to just give a little thought to your environment on that. Thinking about creating environments that give children the opportunity for wonder and to mystery, to start to think about the world around them and understand that it's so much bigger than just what goes on in the classroom, but to appreciate the learning that happens there. In the chat, Susan's going to put a link to a self-regulation presentation. It just sort of links self-regulation and movement and gives you some more resources. This is not a facilitation session on self-regulation, but I do want to give you some more resources if you want to look further on how you can implement those things into your classroom. So just some things to consider when you're thinking about your learning environment is what does a child see when they walk in? Are the materials and furniture arranged to support lots of different types of learning, or are there just tables used in one way all over your classroom? Is space dynamic? Can it be moved around, or is it only able to be used in one way? Is the children's learning made visible? Meaning, is their learning up on the walls? Can they see themselves in that classroom? And we'll show you some examples of that in a little bit. And can children independently select learning materials, or do they need to be asking you for everything every 2 seconds? So if they have power over those things, then that gives them freedom to explore and play and inquire as they move forward. There's a few resources and blogs that are going to pop up in the chat feature. We're not going to go to them now. A couple of them are daily flow templates. So ways you can set up your day in order to facilitate that success. Thinking about how you plan and how we intentionally consider the inquiries and the wonders of our children. The last one is my weekly planner, and that, Deanna McLennan is amazing, is mine and my partner's weekly planner. And what we would do is we used Google Drive to to share that planning together, and we would take into account the wonders of the week before and make sure that we're embedding that and including that in the learning of the week. So that's just one sample of our weekly plan, but hopefully those will give you some ideas moving forward.
If I can just interrupt for just a second. We have so many participants and the chat is moving very quickly. So I have answered this question in the chat, but I think some of you have missed it. I keep getting asked about the links. So at the end of the session tonight, one of the things I do is take all of these links that Becky is sharing, and they're amazing, and I create a web page which goes on the OTF site. And it's Becky Kennedy's workshop resource page. You will get an email, I believe, from OTF tomorrow with that link. I'm also going to share the link with you tonight at the end of the night. It'll be a link that's not active yet, but when you refresh it later tonight after I've done it, you will be able to get that. So yes, everything that's part of the chat, all these links will be part of the resources.
Awesome, thank you. Just going back to where I was. The other thing to think about when you're thinking about your learning environment is taking pictures before and after, and also thinking about a video of your students and how they're using the space. And even if it's just a video, to see how they use the space in a day. Are they all congregating to one area? Is all the learning students happen in one spot? Do they never use the table, or do they only use the floor? Thinking about things like that helps you to change your space with the students in mind. And of course, including them as part of that is fantastic. But making sure that you have that research as to why you're doing what you're doing will help you moving forward for sure. The next one, oh, my slide's not showing up again, but it was just a reminder of why this learning for this child at this time. So this is a video. I'm actually not going to direct you here, just in terms of time, but I do recommend you watching it later on. What it comes down to is this is a man named Doug Clements, and he talks about intentional play-based learning and the continuum of play, going from a free-for-all to a super guided, direct instruction that play doesn't really have a part in it. And finding sort of a balance in that and the intentionality in our play. So it's a great video to watch. It's 5 minutes long. I would recommend you watching that later on. It talks about as well how we can join the students in their play to help bring their learning forward with intentionality, thinking about what we'd like our students to demonstrate for us and questions that we can ask going forward. So we're going to talk about that ourselves. So I'm not going to have you watch that video right now.
Beatrice said that the video is not available. I just clicked on the link and I got the same. So I'm going to try and do a search and see if I can find a version of it that is available. And maybe Becky can do that between, not right now, but maybe after the session before we share the links.
Absolutely. Yes, I can do that for sure, for sure. Also thinking about the way we design our day. Intentional play-based learning involves small groups with each other, students playing together, small groups with an educator working directly with them, one-on-one with an educator, the whole class community as well as independent. So finding ways to have all of those sort of pieces working together. And then thinking back to the flow of the day and how we find time to incorporate all those pieces in there. Consider opportunities for all these types of learning and play. A little piece a question that's been coming up a lot lately amongst kindergarten educators, and this is probably something that grade 1 educators and grade 2 want to know, has been about, well, we don't do guided reading anymore, which is absolutely not the case. Intentional play-based learning still involves guided instruction. It involves small group instruction, meeting our students where they're at. So thinking about why this learning for this student at this time means that absolutely we're still working on those reading and writing skills. We're still working on small group math. So just keep that in mind as we're moving forward, that yes, those solid pedagogical practices have not gone by the wayside, but what it means is that we're honoring students where they're at. And thank you to those of you who were able to get those video links. I apologize, that first one wasn't working. So this one is, it starts with a spark. So how do we get an inquiry started? What do we do with it when it starts? There's another video that Susan will put up into the chat section that I'm not going to send you to, that just sort of talks about listening to the questions and the wonders of our students and moving them forward. Here's an example of a weekly wonder wall. And this is just one way you can do it, where they had some pictures and some pictures up on the wall, and students would ask questions or write their wonders to go along with that, and that sort of helped them to guide their inquiries, thinking about this is what the majority of our students are involved in. The other thing I saw today was they were just reading a book, and that led to a discussion on deep sea and what we know about Mariana's Trench and what's the deadliest animal in the sea. So just thinking about listening to the students. It can start with a book, it can start with an object, it can start with a picture, sparking their curiosity. Sometimes that comes from the students, and sometimes that comes from us as educators, and that's okay too. It means part of that doesn't mean that we have to sort of get away from that, but it can only come from students. It can come from us as well, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Well, I apologize if you're not able to see the slides. Hopefully logging off and on will get back to work.
It seems like there are definitely problems with the mobile app tonight. So I can't tell from the list whether people, what type of device they're on. I'm on an iPad and mine come and go. They're certainly slow to load, but I do get them. So if there's any way of moving onto a computer, that's what we'll suggest.
Absolutely. Sorry, guys. So again, sorry, Susan will put that link to the video in the chat section, but you don't need to go there now. It just talks about how we get that started with a Spark. This is from our kindergarten program on page 27, thinking about when we co-construct that learning, when we start to think about creating those environments and the inquiries together. These are some of the things that you'll see children and educators do together. So thinking that together we're co-constructing learning by observing, by assessing each other, thinking aloud, sharing ideas, asking questions, problem solving, thinking and collaborating. So these are all the activities that we're doing as we are working together. And we're co-constructors of learning, and us as teachers, we're a researcher. Our biggest job is to listen to what our students are saying, so that helps us to learn what next steps we can take. So some misconceptions about teaching and learning in an inquiry stance, and this does come from our program document, thinking that we need to use every topic that children are interested in as the basis for an inquiry. Absolutely not. We all know, and especially grade 1 teachers who have a little bit more of intentionality in terms of what you have to cover in the year, we certainly can sort of direct those inquiries. We can guide our students into learning where we'd like them to go by doing that through books or through objects and sparking that interest. Inquiries must be based on nonfiction texts. Absolutely not. The picture down there is about a bird with colored feathers all over it. And it started about this magical bird and all the thoughts and feelings that the students had behind it. And it led to incredible writing and creativity that had nothing to do with a fiction text. And I know all of our guys are interested in superheroes and Shopkins and all those things, which are, well, we might think silly, but they can lead to some incredible learning. So we need to keep that in mind. The educator should pick a broad topic and have students research subtopics within that. That's sort of where we started with inquiry in the older grades, but absolutely that doesn't need to be the case. When students own that learning, they're the ones doing the learning. When it's directed by us, it's interesting to see that the learning just doesn't go as deep. That only the children can ask questions or generate an inquiry. We've talked about that. And then it's a subject done at a particular time of day, like inquiry time. Absolutely not. When that spark happens, that's when the learning happens. And so if we're flexible enough in our programming and in our flow of the day in order to honor that time and trusting that the learning is happening, it's amazing what we're able to see. And that the children determine everything they learn. Well, that's not the case either. Of course, we have expectations that we're helping our students to achieve. And in grade 1, those topics are a little bit more directed, and we're working on that. So yes, absolutely, we can be part of that learning, and we can be directing that learning. It's not just about the children determining everything that they learn. It's about us working together for sure. So here's an example of once an inquiry started. So this is a class that was interested in sand creations, something so small. And this is called an inquiry map or an audit trail. And there's a little presentation that tells you a little bit more about that. And what it does basically is it starts with a spark. I don't have the beginning of it, but they just have set out sand and different materials to go along with the sand there. The story behind it is right here. And then they took pictures of their students and what they were doing with that sand, what they were adding to it, what they were creating with it. And you can see how the trail sort of goes, and it has students' documentation as well. And it's just posted for the students to see. And that way they're owning their learning and they're adding to their learning as well. It looks like they started to add some water over here to the sand. So they brought in some science concepts. They brought in problem solving. They brought in writing and math. And then it's displayed for them all to see, as well as for parents who come in afterwards to see that as well. So that's just one way to display the learning as it's happening. Here's another example as well, and this was about a space inquiry. We're going to watch a movie or a video in a second about a space inquiry. And it just talks about how the learning is all connected. It starts with a spark, and then it goes from there. One child said, I saw a shooting star last night. And that got the other students to start talking about it. And the teacher said, well, what do we need to do? Well, we need a book. So they went to the library to research some books about space. And then they went online to find some research on that. And these are their representations as it came along. So part of that is just listening, and then it's being responsive to add to those inquiries how they're started, and to encourage students to write and draw about what they see. There's nothing wrong with us saying, oh, can you tell me about that? Can you take a picture of that? What do you see happening there? And the results are absolutely fantastic. So thinking about literacy in an inquiry stance, so I know that we still have the demonstrating literacy and numeracy behaviors is still 1/4 of our curriculum. We want to think about how we're developing and starting students with that strong foundation of literacy and numeracy. So this helps us to get started about thinking about how we can adapt that and work with that. So how are children using letters in their play? What do they know about their names? How do they approach text in a book? How do they use language to negotiate or describe? How do they represent their thinking? And are they bringing social narratives in their play? Are they bringing retells and recounts into their play? And what can we do to sort of support that? The video that Susan just put in the chat section as well, we're not going to go to that right now, but it's there for you to watch, and I do encourage you to watch it later on, is about a school or a classroom where they started by reading Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And then they always set up these little puppets, and which is great, and the students went through that. That's what they did every year. This year they saw the students start to reenact the story. And so together they changed their dramatic center into Goldilocks' cottage, and students started to reenact the story over and over and over again in many different ways, which is just a really exciting way to have them start to retell those stories and add their own reading and writing aspects to that. Our students this year did it with the Three Little Bears, and we had an old overhead projector up, and we had 3 little pigs' hats, and they would reenact it using shadow puppets, just because we had offered those materials out there, knowing the story. And then we knew, just from that little reenactment, we realized that those expectations were already being met, that students were able to retell a simple story, and they had that understanding. So please watch that video later on. It's really, really great. Same thing with math in an inquiry stance. You can see here, this was one of my little students, and all we had done, we had a huge mixing inquiry going on. Actually, it started with baking. Students asked to bake muffins, and then it went from there to, well, they wanted to make their own recipes. And so for us, it was being responsive enough to put out materials that they could use, and they had asked for more materials. And here you can see them starting to mix Play-Doh together. As well, they're using different bowls, measuring cups. We're getting a lot of capacity information in there from what they know. And we had actually hooked a camera up to the student to get the language behind what was happening. And she had actually was very specific in creating a recipe and in what she wanted to add to those ingredients. So that what that does is it just gets us started with what's already going on in the classroom and what they're interested in, and then we're seeing what expectations are being met and what we need to add in order to develop that understanding, or questions we need to ask to develop that understanding. So what ways are the students using those manipulatives and materials? How are they describing it, their measurement? What do they think about what makes a pattern? What are we seeing with that when we put out those craft materials or beads or anything like that? And how do they collect data? How do they make decisions in the classroom? And how can we support that? There's lots of different ways that we can support that as we go. If you look at it's on page 26 in your curriculum where you'll see some of those math and literacy in an inquiry stance guiding questions there. What I would like us to do, though, is to take a minute and think about, if we're thinking about sparking an inquiry, what are some questions that we can ask? What are some questions that we can post in these specific areas in our classroom to start to get students thinking and moving forward? So if you open up your document to page 93, or if you just Google it, to page 93, I'd love for us to put some questions in the boxes here that can be used to help promote student thinking. So I'm going to give us about 5 minutes to do that, and then hopefully you'll be able to take that to your classroom tomorrow. Think about questions that you're going to post around to help move your students forward. So page 93 in your document, I'll put that in the chat. Sorry, Corey, if you just Google it, I can't seem to paste the link into the chat section. My paste button is not working on my mouse. But if you just Google it, you'll be able to get to it. And I apologize, everyone, it's not page 93, it's page 91 and 92. Yes, in the kindergarten doc, apologize. I love that. What gave you the idea for this picture? So just getting them to talk about what they're creating or what they're drawing. What materials are you thinking of using? What do you hear? What do you smell outside? What do you see? Absolutely. What sort of patterns do you see in nature? Definitely. So we're thinking about anything that can really help to move the students thinking forward. What can cause them to have further conversation without us actually changing their play or interrupting their play, I guess. We want to help them move forward. Why did you choose that material, that shape, that voice? And that really works in the block area, in the creative area, definitely. Yes, sorry, Teresa, just click on the A and the toolbar along the left-hand side. What changes have you made to improve it? Oh, very cool. And that can be used especially in the block area, but I can think of lots of different areas around the classroom. What do you think it would look like? Definitely, and oftentimes in the block area especially, I've seen pictures of real buildings. So thinking about why do you think that arch is the way it is? Or how tall do you think you can make your tower? For sure. And we're thinking about noticing and naming the learning in the new kindergarten program, especially in that art creative area. When you start to see those mathematical concepts in what they're doing, for example, a pattern, we name that for them and we help them to think about that further and to move that learning forward for sure. And the one at the text box at the bottom there is general. Absolutely, that can be anywhere in your classroom. And having those up so you remind yourself of questions to ask is fantastic. We actually even had those posted outside of our classroom door so that when my administrator would come in or other visitors would come in, they would have questions that they could ask to find out the learning that was happening at each of those spots around the classroom, so that they could start to see that, this isn't just play. It is play, but there's a lot of learning going on here. So absolutely, these questions can be adapted for lots of different areas in your classroom. Fantastic. And again, it's about open-ended questions, ones that don't end in yes or no, getting them to really start to explore and explain their thinking and talk about it with each other for sure. Oh, and Michelle, that's a great suggestion, putting it right on a lanyard so you have it around with you. I've seen people as well use the top area of their classroom so that those good questions are out there so they can keep that learning going forward. And we're thinking about how those inquiries start. It's by asking these questions and listening to our students' responses for sure. Yes, for sure, take their webinar, definitely. Different fantastic presenters, Tracy, Sims, and Cheryl Enrich, definitely. Okay, we're going to keep moving forward because we're running a little bit out of time. And there's one video that I really want you to see by somebody named Joanna Babelis. So this is just a little picture of her video, but it's a 7-minute video. I really, really want us to watch it. It sort of talks about inquiry from a whole group approach and from a whole the environment. It takes into account literacy and numeracy and all those areas. So Susan's going to put that up now. That's the last video that I'm going to direct you to today. I want you to think about as you're watching the video, yes, thank you, the connections to literacy and numeracy that you see there. So her blog is linked on top, and she has some amazing resources there. The video is the YouTube kind of link right below it. Click on that, and it's 7 minutes long. It's totally worth watching the whole 7 minutes. You get a full picture about what it looks like in an inquiry-based classroom. So we will come back in about 7 minutes. Okay, we're going to move on. Hopefully most people are popping back in after finishing that video. We're just going to move a little bit into documentation. So hopefully you got a little bit of a taste about what Joanna did in her classroom. I know that video is a few years old, but the value in watching to see how that inquiry works in her classroom was huge to me. So the last foundation really of play-based programming is that play-based learning program assessment supports the child's learning and autonomy as a learner. So it helps us to move that learning forward. So thinking about documentation and how we move that learning forward, we're working on moving from capturing and documenting just activities to capturing and documenting learning. As opposed to just taking pictures of finished products, we're taking pictures of the process so that they understand that the learning is what's important. And instead of just documenting alone by ourselves with our doors closed, we're working with educators in the process. So thinking about asking not just our teaching partners, but our colleagues as well going along with that. And instead of documenting just single events as a one-off, we're capturing the learning throughout the process of an inquiry, just those examples of the audit trails that I showed you before. So this is one more video, and I realize we're running a little short on time. This is about, it's called Math and Plato. And what it is it's these little guys playing together. And what I'd like us to do is just take a quick look at the video, and then we're going to notice and name the learning that's happening. So thinking about what's going on in this video in the context of their play. It looks like in their classroom, this is an assumption, but it looks like in their classroom that they have a pizza store of some sort going on, because that's what they're creating. So thinking about the larger context of an inquiry, this might be one piece of the puzzle that you've added. So if you had a pizza parlor in your dramatic center, you have this play out, and this might be what comes along with it. So ideally, I wanted us to watch it twice. We're just going to watch it once. And I want you to think about the learning that's happening. And if you'd like, also consider the expectations that might be met in terms of the curriculum in the demonstrating literacy and numeracy behaviors. We don't have to go there today. Just start by thinking about the learning that's happening and what you might do moving forward. As you're coming back, I'd love you to just put some of the learning that you saw. If you just want to add that to the chat feature, we'll take just 1 minute to just discuss some of the learning that we saw happening in that, and especially that the child in the pink shirt near the back there. It was amazing when I started to really watch him, especially thinking about the learning that I saw. So if you want to add a few comments to the chat section about the learning that you saw, noticing and naming it, that would be fantastic. Absolutely counting and estimating. Counting forwards and backwards was exciting for me to see one-to-one correspondence, for sure. Also consider some of the other 4 areas of our program document, and some of the things that you might have, Rochelle, you were reading my mind. Social skills, taking turns, those parts of those belonging and contributing was phenomenal. And we think about the problem solving and innovating frame as well. And just in that, we saw them working together to solve that problem, finding new ways to cut them, starting to put it in and then taking it away, sharing, absolutely. So thinking about other things that you can add to that as well, just to move that learning forward, or questions that you can ask to see really what they learn, what they know, and how we can move that forward. And that happens in the context of an authentic inquiry, right? It's easy to start to think about that in terms of a pizza place. I can say that because my students had one going where they started with this, and then they started creating their own pizzas, and they worked really hard to get those pizzas divided up just so, and that also added to order taking. Little things that bring in that reading and that writing and problem solving, self-regulation when you have to take turns in order to use the materials. Absolutely. Yes, Tricia, everybody says that, that they were cutting each triangle individually rather than making it a circle and slicing it into triangles. It's just such an interesting thought behind it, for sure. The next one, well, you know what, I do really want you to watch it, and partly this is because it's my students, and I'll tell you the story behind it. I wonder why they only wanted 11 slices. Absolutely. I love that you're starting to think about that documentation and moving it forward. So this one is about experimenting with water. In our classroom, we had a vet center happening. They were really started off with a doctor's office, and then it turned out into a veterinarian's office. And what they had done is someone had donated these little bags for, looks like for IV fluids, and these tubes to go along with it. And the little guy who you're going to hear talking in the video was he's one of the lowest students in my class, and then you'll hear another girl in the video, and she's one of the highest students in my class, just so you can get the context behind the discovery that was going on here. And what he had done is he had figured out how to take the water get it from the tap, and all the way into the bag, so you'd figure out how to suck that in. It's like a 30-second video, so take a quick watch, and again, add to the chat section when you come back about some of the learning that you saw going on there. That would be great. So I love the thought process of what some of you guys are coming up with, that maybe they'll lead into dinosaur blood, maybe it will come up with other veterinary inquiries that's going on. The funny thing is that what they did do with it, immediately after they were finished the video, you'll see there's a drinking fountain right beside it. And so one of the students, I think the one you heard say sorry, he figured out how to hook it up to the drinking fountain, and we ended up having water all over the classroom because the drinking fountain doesn't work for that. But the amazing part behind it was the value in figuring out that he could get the water sucked into the tube to go along with that. We actually ended up taking it outside, and they were able to figure out how to get water from one end of our playground to the other end, using all those tubes connected and tape connected. So it actually ended up leading nowhere into more of the medical field. It led into getting water from one end of the playground to the other end. We also had a space inquiry going on later on in the year after watching some of the Chris Hadfield videos, and they ended up using these pouches, which look very similar to how they drink water in space. They ended up using some of the pouches to suck water up, which was a little bit gross, but it was also amazing learning as well that they would make those connections. So that takes a lot of patience not to stress about the water mess. Absolutely. So that is part of that's really part of that understanding of play and inquiry is messy. It's not neat all the time. And so for us to be able to take a step back and just see the power and the value and the learning that's going on without our own preconceived ideas of what it needs to look like is huge. That's also why we started the conversation with building relationships. Got students, number one, know what we expect out of them, and number two, that they know that we trust them and that we value them, and that we know that they're capable of these things. I didn't clean up that water. They went down to the custodian and asked to borrow the mop, and they cleaned up the water. And no one was in trouble. It was just part of the learning process. So they understand that they're allowed to take those risks, and that's huge in promoting that inquiry in your classroom. And so for some of us, yes, that's a big step forward in the learning. Mike has a pros the room, Dustin. Absolutely. When they can take responsibility, when they know where the materials are, again, that's why we talked about that first. And they can use those materials and they know how to move that learning forward. So some of the tools for documentation that we've used, and we're just going to touch a little bit on this, and then this will get your learning forward. I'm going to share with you a little bit about what we use. The first thing I want to show you is I want to talk about this picture right here. So one of the things that we did, I'm a big, passionate believer in digital tools for documentation. I've done 2 OTF presentations on that now. But what I've discovered is that there's so much value in the technology in terms of sharing the learning at home and storing it for myself and my partner to look at. But there's also so much power in those students having their learning in their hands. And so that led us to the start of the learning journey binders, which is what these two guys are looking at right now. And what that is it's documentation of their best work that they've decided to put in. So that might be pictures that we've taken together, or drawings that they've done, or notes that they've written. Anything that displays their best work goes in there, and then that's shared at home. And that's the kindergarten memory book at the end of the year. So I had spent 40 hours when you're creating these memory books for my students, and then I discovered, well, that's if they're putting the work into it, then they take the ownership over the learning and the memories behind that. So we got lots of great feedback about these. And these were just 2 students who had casually grabbed their learning journey binders out in the middle of the year and were sharing it with each other and looking through it. We also use Google Drive to store folders. We're a Google Drive board, so not everybody is. There's a link to a presentation on how to use Google Drive and Google Forms in order to store documentation. It's accessible, it's easy to use. Google Forms as well, we have all of our curriculum expectations listed there. And you'll see links in that presentation that's listed in the chat section on how you can just use a form that's already created with curriculum expectations, and it sort of looks like just creating it like a quiz that you're answering questions to for your students based on the observations you've seen. And for us, we store that all digitally, and then our it used to be called report card comments, but our communication of learning is really done because we'd be able to look at a whole picture view of the child for their best learning and their growth in learning, and then their next steps in learning. Explain Everything is another tool that we use to help students, can use, to document their learning. You can upload it directly to Google Drive, you can share it to YouTube, and basically it's just an online whiteboard where they can record their learning. They can also use, they can also add writing to that, and they can keep it going as long as they'd like. So it's just another way to show their learning and to keep it going. It's often, we like to use video tools as opposed to just pictures, because the conversations that happen between those students are just phenomenal and so much more powerful than even just a picture or me writing out as fast as I can. Kristen, glad you asked that. Absolutely. So if you go to that link in the chat section to the Google Drive presentation, it is full of Google Forms that are already created for the 4 frames. So I haven't done all those, but they're ones that I've collected and have permission to share. So please feel free to look at that. Easy Blogger is something else that we've used, and it's just basically links to YouTube and Google Drive. So if you're interested in that, it helps students to blog themselves. So we would share that learning with home and then with the world, and they see that their learning doesn't stop at the end of the day or just within the walls of the classroom, that their learning is powerful and goes out to the world. And as well, we would watch it with each other at the end of the day, and we would do a sharing piece so that they could share their learning and celebrate that with each other. And that was such a big driver of inquiries because other students wanted to do that, and they wanted to learn more about that. And then the learning was coming from each other as opposed to being directed by me. And again, it's so easy to use. Students click their pictures, you can set it up quickly, and then they're able to go. Good question, Diane, about the privacy. So all of our students had permission they all had social media permission, but if they didn't, then they wouldn't use Easy Blogger, or we would have it set up as a private account. So it was a choice, and we understand that not all parents are comfortable with that, and so we recognize that, and we find other ways. Students who can't go on Blogger, they can still make videos, and then that would go into our private Google Drive account. Seesaw is something new that I haven't used, but it's so popular with lots of educators, so I always want to add that in there. The only thing to keep in mind with Seesaw is that, oh, Michelle, I'm sorry, if some of those forms need permission to access, just ask for permission from me and I will make sure to grant that to you. Seesaw is a really popular kind of all-encompassing tool. They can use it as an interactive whiteboard. You can communicate with parents. There's a blog feature on there. There's ways to keep your learning documented. So people are really embracing this as a digital documentation tool. The only thing to keep in mind with is that it's a third-party app, so therefore it's not stored in Canada. So that's something that we've been told to be careful of in our school board, because your learning technically isn't, the information technically isn't owned by us, it's now owned by Seesaw. I think that's about it, and Seesaw owns your content as well. So those are things to keep in mind with Seesaw as well. So any questions, I'll be up on the chat for the next few minutes. So you're welcome to ask that, and I'll try and get back to that. And as well, please email me at any time So that's my last one, rekennedy@scudsby.online.ca. I love to chat about these things. Follow me on Twitter. Follow our early years account on Twitter. We love to connect because we know that the learning is more valuable the more that are in there.
So I'm just going to say a few things in conclusion, and then if you have other questions to finish up with Becky, you can do that after I'm finished. So Becky, thank you very much. There was enough there for 3 presentations, I think. So lots of amazing resources, and I know that many of you didn't have a chance to look at everything, but as I've said, everything will come as part of resources. So I'm going to mention that that OTF really values your feedback, and I've just put 3 links into the chat right now, so that they're going to go quickly if people are still commenting in the chat. So scroll back and look for them. The first one that I posted is a link to the feedback. You will also get that automatically when you log out of Blackboard Collaborate. So as soon as you close this window or quit the application, you will get a link. But it's there anyway if you want to open it, and then it's open in your browser. The second link that I've put there, please read that it says it's active by noon tomorrow. That's the resource link. So that will have a link to the recording of tonight. It will also have a link to all of the resources that Becky has shared so generously with us tonight, and I will be working on that right after the session. So it won't be active immediately. It's not active now. And the third link is to the OTF calendar, and that's has all of the upcoming sessions in OTF. And they're also on this page right here. This is actually an active link, so you can click right on the link on that page, and that will take you out to the OTF calendar. We have a full calendar for the rest of this term, and we go right to the end of May, basically Mondays to Thursdays, and some awesome, awesome sessions. AQ courses in math, technology, and kindergarten are still being funded or subsidized by OTF up to $450. So you go to the OTF website and search for AQ course subsidies, and you'll find it. There's a direct link right there, and you can find that information. One of the areas that OTF is supporting is financial literacy for teachers, and so there's the first ever conference coming up at the end of November if that's an area that you're interested in. Again, go to the OTF website and search for that. And finally, OTF is very active on social media, and they post all kinds of links, resources, and upcoming sessions, so you can follow them. You can follow them there. So I'm going to put it back to Becky's final slide, which has her contact information. And I'll say once again, thanks to all of you. We had a large group tonight. We had a few technology issues, which I apologize for. I'm going to get on the phone or email with Blackboard Collaborate tomorrow and see if I can get some answers to the app question, because my app stopped working as well on my iPad, and I was just looking at white screens. And there were some other issues too, so rest assured that we will do our best to look after that, because we want these experiences to be really positive for you. So thank you all for coming and being patient through all of that, and a really big thank you to Becky. I'm going to turn off my mic now, and if any of you have questions for her, use your mic or put things into the chat, and we'll give you some time to finish up with that. Thank you.